For the love of Fatima al-Zahra in particular, a second salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. For the hastening of the reappearance of the master of our time, and to give him our condolences as we remember the martyrdom of his grandfather Imam al-Hassan, a louder salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Indeed, the narration which I just recited is a well-known narration of our fourth Imam, Imam Ali ibn al-Hussein Zainul Abidin alayhi salam. Within this narration, the Imam says, Inna din Allah azza wa jal la yusab bil-uqul al-naqisa. That indeed the religion of Allah cannot be attained or correctly understood with these deficient intellects. وَالْآرَاءِ الْبَاطِلَةِ وَالْمَقَايِيسِ الْفَاسِدَةِ. Neither can your incorrect opinions or these invalid analogies take you to understanding the religion of Allah. So if there is a method to understand it, وَلَا يُصَابُ إِلَّا بِالتَّسْلِيمِ. The one who submits to it will understand. فَمَنْ سَلَّمَ لَنَا سَلِمَ وَمَنْ اِقْتَدَى بِنَا هُدِيَ. The one who submits to us will be saved, the one who follows and emulates us will be guided, but those who continue to act upon their own opinions, or they have any haraj or agitation towards what we have deemed or ruled, they have disbelieved in Allah and what He has revealed within the Quran unknowingly. You see, over here in this narration, you find that it has been a subject of debate and discussion. That what does the Imam mean when he says that the religion of Allah cannot be understood by these deficient intellects? Because on one side, when we look at the narration, the Imam at one level is demonstrating that, oh human being, if you want to reach the core reality of this deen, then you do it by submitting. And you do it by submitting to the Quran, to the text of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. But on the other side, there are certain clues within this narration that demonstrate that the Imam is not condemning every form of intellectual pursuit. Number one, the Imam in this narration says, Inna din Allah azza wa jal la yusabu bil-uqul al-naqisa. He says the religion of Allah cannot be understood by the deficient intellects. He is not saying that every intellect cannot understand the deen of Allah. And at the second level, you find in this narration, the Imam is referring to qiyas and juridic analogy. What this goes to demonstrate is that the statement was stated in a particular context. But despite that, the question it remains, which many people they ask today, that when it comes to the religion of Islam, in what facets of the religion am I allowed to inquire and ask and to use my intellect? And what facets of the religion am I to submit to the Quran and to the texts that we find? Because on one side, yes, we have such a tradition, but on the other side, we have many narrations from the Imams of Ahlul Bayt which speak about the status and role of the intellect. You know, when we look at many of our hadith works, namely Al-Kafi, which is one of our four early canonical works, and Bihar al-Anwar, which comes much later, but it is a voluminous corpus of hadith, you find that both of them begin with Kitab al-Aqli wal-Jahl. Both of them, they begin with the book of the intellect. And I say this as an open challenge. There is no sect within the Muslim world that has as many in-depth narrations about the aql and the intellect as the school of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. For example, one narration will say that the intellect has a primordial role in existence. As Rasulullah is known to have said, أَوَّلُ مَا خَلَقَ اللَّهُ الْعَقْلُ. The first creation of God was the intellect. Another narration will show that, O human being, when you are rewarded and you are punished, it is on the basis of your intellectual capacity that you're given reward and punishment. The first hadith of Al-Kafi narrated from Imam Muhammad al-Baqir salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. The narration it says, لَمَّا خَلَقَ اللَّهُ الْعَقْلَ إِسْتَنْطَقَهُ. That when Allah created the intellect, He gave it the faculty of speech or the ability فَقَالَ لَهُ أَقْبِلْ فَأَقْبَلْ فَقَالَ لَهُ أَجْبِرْ فَأَجْبَرْ. That after Allah creates the intellect, He says to the intellect, come forward, it comes forward. And He says to it, go backwards, it goes backwards. After that, Allah says, وَإِزَّتِي وَجَلَالِي مَا خَلَقْتُ خَلْقًا وَأَحَبُّ إِلَيَّ مِنْكَ وَلَا أَكْمَلْتُكَ إِلَّا فِي مَنْ أُحِبُّ. That by my might, by my honor, there is nothing which I have created to me which is more beloved than you, the Aql. And I only perfect you in those individuals whom I love. So if there is a group in history that whatever question was posed to them, they gave the answer, this is a sign that Allah loved that group, because the intellect is perfected in the ones whom Allah loves. But after that, the narration says, Ama iyaka amur wa iyaka anha. That it is only you that I command, it is only you that I prohibit. And then He says, wa bika u'aqib wa bika u'tib. And it is through you that I punish, and it is through you that I give reward. Over here in this narration, God is showing that when an individual's intellectual capacity is raised, then you find your reward is also raised. But at the same time, your punishment is also raised. So what all of these narrations go to demonstrate is that the intellect has a profound position within the life of a human being. But despite all of these narrations, each of us as Muslims, we recognize that there are limits to the intellect. For example, rationally, I can prove the existence of Allah. And rationally, I can prove the need for prophets. But can you rationally prove what will happen in the hereafter? That my aql tells me that there will be a sirat and a mizan and there will be two angels. No, over here we're dependent on the Quran, we're dependent upon the hadith. So this is one example that shows that yes, our intellect, it has limits. But I'll give you another practical example. Is there any Muslim who will say that I disagree with the Quran? Na'udhu billah. No, they'll say that my intellect doesn't understand this ayat. But no Muslim will say that I have understood the verse, but I am placing my intellect higher than the verse. This goes to demonstrate that we innately recognize that the intellect has limits as well. And that's why, as we explore this subject tonight, the first question that I'll examine is that what role does the intellect play in aqaid? The second level we'll examine is that does the Quran present rational arguments? From the third level we'll examine did the prophets of Allah use rational and intellectual arguments? From the fourth level we'll examine that did the Imams of Ahlul Bayt use rational arguments? At the fifth level we'll examine what is the role of the intellect in fiqh and Islamic law. And at the final level we'll examine that the greatest quality of the companions of Ahlul Bayt was not the intellect, but rather, as the Ziyarat mentioned, it was their taslim and their submission towards Allah. And based upon these stages, we'll try to come to a conclusion about this topic. Now, at the first level, when it comes to the intellect, and when we examine the hadith and the Quran, we find that a great emphasis has been placed that, O human being, when it comes to the realm of rationale and establishing the existence of God and your aqaid, that the intellect has a role within the life of a human being. You know, there's a tradition from Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. The Imam in that tradition says, Man kana aqilan kana lahu deen. That individual who uses his intellect, that individual has held fast to his religion and his deen. وَمَنْ كَانَ لَهُ دِينٌ دَخَلَ الْجَنَّةِ. And that individual who holds on to the deen is indeed an individual who will enter paradise. You see, in this regard, we have many narrations that say that this intellect of human being, through which you understand, through which you comprehend, this is that messenger which is within you. And these anbiya which have come with God's proof are the aql which is outwards, they are al-aql That if I told you there was an army behind this mountain, would you believe me? And they said that we have never known you to be anything but sadiq and amin, truthful and honest. Rasulullah says, now I am telling you there is no God but Allah and I am His messenger. You see, over here, Rasulullah is being used in a rational argument. But it is not the text of Rasulullah which is the proof. Because at the first level, it is the intellect that we use to establish the existence of Allah. That's why when you look at the Quran, there are many rational arguments Allah uses in the Quran for us to reflect. For example, one ayat will say, لَوْ كَانَ فِيهِمَا آلِهَةٌ إِلَّا اللَّهُ لَفَسَدَتَا. That if in the heavens and the earth there was a God besides Allah, there would be fasad and corruption. In other words, if there were multiple creators, each of them would have their system, and those systems may collide with each other. If we examine the world and see a complete harmony, that just demonstrates that there is one source which is the source of that harmony. Over here, the Quran is using this rational argument. It is saying, O human being, do you not understand that if there were multiple creators besides Allah, there would be corruption? No, I'll give you another ayah. Surah Al-Waqi'ah, verses 83 through 87. فَلَوْلَا إِذَا بَلَغَتِ الْحُلْقُومَ. That moment when the soul, it reaches the throat of an individual. وَأَنْتُمْ حِينَئِذٍ تَنْظُرُونَ. And you are watching that person who is dying. وَنَحْنُ أَقْرَبُ إِلَيْهِ مِنْكُمْ وَلَكِنْ لَا تُبْصِرُونَ. In reality, when that person is dying and his soul has reached his throat, at that moment we are closer to him than you, but you do not recognize. After this, the Quran gives a rational argument, which is a complete falsifiability test. And what that means is that, O human being, if you want to prove this book of mine false, all you have to do is carry out this challenge which I am saying. And if you are able to do that successfully, then this book is not from Allah. But if you are not able to do that, then your aql and your rationale should tell you that this is a divine book. You know what the next ayat they say? They say, فَلَوْلَا إِن كُنْتُمْ غَيْرَ مَدِينِينَ تَرْجِعُونَهَا إِن كُنْتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. That, O human being, if you are not constrained, if your ability is not limited, if you are not dependent, then the only thing you need to do is that you need to return the soul back to the body after the person has died. You know, modern science is amazing in one regards. I mean, those diseases 40, 50 years ago, people would die of polio and diseases that in today's world are cured with a simple vaccine. But even in today's world, after all of this development, is there any doctor who claims that I bring the dead back to life? And in reality, you find that that is not the case. The Quran is giving this as a rational argument over here. So we find in the Quran, rationality has its place. And rationality has a role. That's why when you look at the hadith of Ahlul Bayt, the hadith of Ahlul Bayt demonstrate that aql does not just mean to understand things, but rather at the highest level, aql means to understand things to take you towards Allah. You know, many of the enemies of Ahlul Bayt from a worldly perspective were intelligent individuals. If you're going to fool somebody who is intelligent, then you yourself must have a level of intelligence. So you know, Imam Sadiq was asked about this reality. They said to the Imam that ma'al aql, that what is the intellect? The Imam says, ma ubida bihir rahman wa maqtusiba bil jinan. That the aql is that through which ar-Rahman and Allah is worshipped. And the aql is that through which paradise is acquired. So they said to the Imam, in my own words, that, oh Imam, you said that the aql is through which paradise is acquired. But there are many individuals وَلَيْسَ بِعَقْلٍ. He says that thing in reality which he has is satanic. And it is something which resembles aql, but in reality it is not aql. So you find over here that at the highest level, the intellect is something which takes you towards Allah. That is why when you look at the Quran, the Anbiya of Allah alayhimus salam, they would use rational arguments as well. Yes, one way to establish prophethood is a mu'jiza. The prophets of God, they demonstrated mu'jizat and miracles. But at the other level, they also use rational arguments. You know, for example, when you look at the life of Nabi Ibrahim, there are 3 famous places in the Quran where Nabi Ibrahim argued based on rationality. The first of them is when the people of the town, they leave. So Ibrahim, he goes to the temple where the idols are. And he destroys all of the idols except for the largest idols over there. When he does this and the people, they return, they notice that their temple is destroyed. They understand that it must have been Ibrahim who did this. So they come to Ibrahim, and the Quran says, they say, أَفَعَلْتَ هَذَا بِآلِهَتِنَا يَا Ibrahim? That, oh Ibrahim, did you do this towards our gods? You know what Ibrahim says? He doesn't say, I am Khalilullah and I am the Prophet of Allah. No, he says, بَلْ فَعَلَهُ كَبِيرُهُمْ هَذَا فَاسْأَلُوهُمْ إِنْ كَانُوا يَنْتِقُونَ. He says, but rather, it was the largest idol who destroyed the rest of them. Why don't you ask these idols who did it if they're able to speak? You know, the Quran, after this, uses an expression it does not use anywhere else. It says that the moment Ibrahim said this, فَرَجَعُوا إِلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ. All of those individuals, raja'a means to return. And they returned to themselves. It was as if the rational argument of Ibrahim was so powerful that they finally began to reflect and have a conscience about what they were doing. So you find this is one example in the Quran. Another example in the life of Ibrahim is that the Quran, it mentions an incident which takes place between Ibrahim and Nimrud, who was the ruler of the time. And within that, the ayat of the Quran says, أَلَمْ تَرَ إِلَى الَّذِي حَاجَ إِبْرَاهِيمَ فِي رَبِّهِ أَنْ آتَاهُ اللَّهُ الْمُلْكَ. That have you not seen that individual who argued with Ibrahim by saying that Allah gave me the kingdom? In other words, when Nimrud saw his rule from the east to the west, he began to think that I'm all powerful. So you know what Ibrahim says? إِذْ قَالَ إِبْرَاهِيمُ that when it comes to the Tawheed of Allah, rational arguments can prove the Tawheed of Allah. When it comes to Risalah, rationality can prove Risalah as well. That Imam Sadiq, one day an individual says to the Imam alayhi salam, that how does Allah communicate with His creation? You know what the Imam replies? The Imam says Allah is unseen, Allah is unheard. So Allah sends a group of individuals as His representatives who are human beings through which He communicates. You find the Imam shows when it comes to Risala, rationality is there. When it comes to Imam, rationality is there as well. That you find that if there is a perfect system, that system also needs representation and protection as well. And from that angle, we find Imam is a lutf and a grace. But yes, we understand even when it comes to Aqaid, there are certain sifat and attributes of Allah will only understand via the hadith. And there are certain things about Risalah will only understand via the hadith. When it comes to Ma'ad, there are many things we'll understand via the hadith. You know, in today's world, we find that there are two movements. There is one movement that seeks to remove rationality altogether because they feel threatened. And then there is another movement that seeks to rationalize every facet of the deen. You know, how many times have you heard individuals that they'll speak about the deen and they'll say that, look, in the modern world, traveling is not like what it used to be. So the question is that does this ahkam of salatul qasr, salat being shortened, does it apply in the modern world? Or they'll say that when you look at the issues of the inheritance of women, for example, Islam is very out of date in this regard. You know, over here, the question that we need to ask, which is an important question at the next level of this discussion, is that does aql have a role in understanding the Sharia and the laws of God? You see, when a jurist, he approaches the exercise of deriving a law, we say at one level we have Quran, at the second level we have Sunnah, at the third level we have aql, and that ijma and consensus where the view of the imam is there. But every jurist, they say, that when you have a Quran which is giving a clear understanding, and you have a hadith which is giving a clear understanding, over here we submit to the text of the Aimma alayhi wassalam. Yes, aql has a role. You know, we do not need a hadith to tell us that dhulm is haram. The aql of a human being tells us that dhulm is haram. Or I'll give you another example where aql has a role in law. Do we need a hadith that says that when you go to Hajj, you have to buy a ticket and you have to get a visa? No, our aql tells us that if you're going to go to Hajj, all of those prerequisites, you need to do them as well. But no, there are many things which are clearly stated that we submit to. And you know, in this regard, there's a famous exchange that occurs between Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. It occurs between Imam as-Sadiq and Abu Hanifa. You know, when Imam as-Sadiq, he's introduced to Abu Hanifa for the first time, they say that this is a very intelligent individual. Yani huwa rajulun daqi ila akhiri, all the different phrases. So when Imam as-Sadiq, he looks at him, he says that, are you the one who introduces your own opinions into the deen? Abu Hanifa says that this is something which is natural, that everyone exercises their own analogies in the religion. So you know, Imam Sadiq asks a series of questions that goes to demonstrate that when it comes to the laws of Islam, our primary responsibility is to submit. You know what the Imam says? The Imam says, oh Abu Hanifa, that you created Adam from clay and you created me from fire. So in this regard, we see that yes, rationale time and time again has a place, but there are also limits to that rationale. And one of the greatest demonstration of that limit and that submission are the companions of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. You know, on the day of Safin, it's stated within the works of history that Malik had come so close to the tent of Muawiyah that he could have gone and he could have killed Muawiyah. You know, at that moment, many of us would rationalize. We would say that this is the enemy of my Imam, that I have the right to kill him. But as he is approaching the tent, a messenger comes and says that, "Oh Malik, Ali ibn Abi Talib is telling you to return." You know, Malik, without any hesitation, he submits at that moment. Even though there are many ways that his rationalization could have been valid at the outward level. That is why when we look at the ziyarah about the companions of Ahlul Bayt, and in particular the companions of Imam al-Hussein, we say, "Assalamu alaikum wa ala al-arwah allati hallat bifinaik." That we say that you are those souls who annihilated yourself at the doorstep of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. You see, these individuals had aql, and they were intelligent. Habib is described as rajulun faqih. Burayd ibn al-Khudayr is described as Sayyidul Qurra in Kufa, the best of the reciters of the Quran. But no, what the ziyarah praises was the tasneem of these individuals. That if Imam al-Hussein stated something, they submitted to that reality. To the extent, what was their submission? You know, every Muslim knows that in your final moments you say La ilaha illallah. But when you look at the maqatil, none of the maqatil mention those were their final words. The maqatil mention that in their dying moments they say Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. Assalamu alayka ya ibn Rasulullah. In other words, they are demonstrating that to submit to Hussein is to submit to the deen of Allah. That's why in their ziyarat we don't say that you are just the ashab of Imam al-Hussein, but we say Assalamu alaykum ya ansar dinullah. That by submitting to Hussein you submitted to the deen. Assalamu alaykum ya ansar Rasulullah. And by submitting to Hussein you submitted to Rasulullah, the Fatima al-Zahra, the Amir al-Mu'mineen, and you submitted to Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba. You see, when you look at the seerah of Imam al-Hassan, one vast difference that we notice between the seerah of Imam al-Hassan and the seerah of Imam al-Hussein are the differences within their companions. The situation in Imam al-Hassan's time was such that you find many of them could not openly express their allegiance to Ahlul Bayt. Hujr ibn Ali is an individual who dies near that time period. And it's stated that even the commander of Imam al-Hassan's army, when he was ready to go to war with Muawiyah, Ubaydullah ibn Abbas, you find that he was bribed by Muawiyah and he leaves the side of Imam al-Hassan. That a commander is the spirit of your army, and your commander, he ends up betraying you. That what is the ghurba and the loneliness of Imam al-Hassan? You know, it's stated after that, Imam al-Hassan says that I won't fight. The people at that moment began to say, Na'udhu billah, that Hassan has become a kafir and a disbeliever. And it's stated that as he's within that plains, Imam al-Hassan, he stands to pray salat. And Shaykh al-Mufid, he records in Kitab al-Irshad that as he's standing to pray salat, an individual comes and he stabs the thigh vomit his liver. And as he's vomiting the pieces of his liver, he says to his brother, "Oh Hussein, cover these pieces so Zainab and Kulthum aren't able to see." But I say, "Oh Imam al-Hassan, a time will come on the day of Ashura that Sayyida Zainab will watch وَالشَّمَرْ جَالِسٌ عَلَى صَدْرِ الْحُسَيْنِ." You know, as Imam al-Hassan is in his final moments, it's stated that Imam al-Hussein begins to cry. And as Imam al-Hussein is crying, Imam al-Hassan says, "Atabki alayya ya Aba Abdullah?" That, "Oh my brother, do you cry over me?" "Abki alayk." In reality, I cry over you. "La yawman ka yawmika ya Hussein." That, "Oh Hussein, there is no day like yours." And you know, in this remembrance it's stated that Imam al-Hassan also gave a wasiyah to his son Qasim as he's passing away. You know that wasiyah, it's stated in certain maqatil that the Imam says, "Ida wajadta ammaka al-Hussein ghariban wahidan faridan atshana." That, "Oh my son, when you find your uncle alone, thirsty on that day, then be my representative." You know, on the day of Ashura, Imam al-Hussein wasn't giving permission to Qasim, but a point it comes that Qasim, he shows the letter of his father. And when he shows the letter of his father, Sayyid ibn Tawus, he says, "Baqaya hatta ghashi alayhima." That both of them cried so much that they felt unconscious, crying and embracing each other. The Imam says, "Oh Qasim, you have permission." You know, Qasim, he goes to fight. A point it comes where Qasim is struck with the sword and he falls to the ground. You know, Imam al-Hussein, at the bodies of Egypt, the Shuhada, you would say a line. When Ali Akbar is martyred, he says, "Ala dunya ba'daka al-afa," may this world turn into dust. And when Abbas was martyred, he said, "Alan kasara dahri," now my back has become broken. But you know what Imam al-Hussein said when Qasim fell to the ground? He said, "Azza wallah ala ammek," that, "Oh Qasim, how difficult is it for your uncle that you were asking him for help, but he wasn't able to help you on that day." على لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. مات الحسين. يا حسين، يا حسين.
زندہ